Hey, everybody. Good evening. Happy Sunday. It is March 29th, and I appreciate y'all being here so very much. And we have been doing in the evenings around this time, give or take, usually a little later, we've been doing call ins where people call in and show up on camera or at least on audio and share their thoughts. Tonight's a little different, and we're going to be doing a lot of interviews as well, but my interviews will by and large not be pre recorded where you can't jump in with a little comment or question. Instead, they'll be mostly live streams. Not all of them, but most of them. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And just wanted to mention if anyone is able to support the channel, all the ways to do that are beneath this video. And I'm going to bring in our guest here. This is actually a repeat guest. Andrew Jasko was on the channel quite a while ago. It's been a few years at this point, but we do have an interview we did a while ago. It's called Reclaiming Our Identity After Religious Indoctrination. I'll have the link for that beneath this video, so you can go check that out afterwards. But I do want to bring our guest on. Andrew Jasko is with us tonight. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Tim. Great to be back.
Great to see you. It's been a while. I forget how long ago it was from our earlier one, but it's probably been like 2 or 3 years, right?
It might have been longer. It might have been like 6. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been doing this for 6 years total. So yeah, if it was in the first year, it could be 6 years or at least 5.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It's so good to see you again. I'm going to jump in with a quick bio. And then if you could be thinking of some fun things to share, like your hobbies or quirks or anything. But Andrew Jasko is a religious trauma specialist. He's a writer, speaker, and a therapist whose work grows out of both his lived deconstruction as well as a lot of formal study. He was raised in a minister's family. He became a preacher and a missionary to India. He later deconverted from evangelical or Pentecostal Christianity, and he now helps people to untangle those kind of harmful beliefs, as well as to heal trauma in their minds and their bodies, and to rebuild our lives after high control religion. On his site, which I'll have the links for beneath this video, he presents himself as someone who works comfortably with clients. Excuse me. He works comfortably with clients who are secular, spiritual, and even still religious or undecided. You can go there and check out what he does. If you would like to consider him for possibly connecting as a therapist, he is open to that, and we'll go into that a little bit more in the conversation. Academically, he studied theology at Wheaton College and Princeton Seminary. He earned a Master's of Philosophy, is it?
That was a Master of Divinity.
I'm sorry, Master of Divinity from Oxford in classical Indian religion.
Sorry. The Master of Divinity was Princeton Seminary. That was in the Christian days. And I got a Master's in Philosophy in classical Indian religion from Oxford.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've got them reversed in my notes. My apologies.
I have too many master's degrees.
That's a good problem to have. And he also has a lot of training in counseling psychology. He has written articles. He does a lot of interviews. He has the programs that he does. He's also a public speaker, again, focusing on religious trauma, fear of hell, purity culture, sexual repression and attachment. I mean, you deal with it all. Mental health stigma, non-dual or secular spirituality, psychedelics, as well as political psychology with authoritarian faith. So he's coming to us today from Los Angeles. And that's what I know about you so far in terms of remembering what I remembered so far and trying to catch up with what you've been doing in the last few years. But if you could tell us more about what you've been up to since we last spoke and some fun things, and then we'll jump into into some more deep topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really good to be here. So since we last spoke, I finished my master's in counseling degree, and then went to Oxford, moved to the UK to study Indian philosophy and religion. I mean, religion is something of a misnomer because I really studied a lot of philosophical traditions, which a lot of them are actually atheist. So there's a lot of actually so-called Hindu and Buddhist traditions that are actually atheistic, secular, materialistic. So I'm really interested in consciousness studies and psychedelics and just transformational experiences. So I found that just studying Eastern and Western traditions really, really helped me in my own healing journey. And so I'm really excited to kind of bring that in. It was also something of like a full circle journey for me since I started out doing missionary work in India. So I kind of became like a reverse missionary, if you will, just studying the rich philosophy and psychology in terms of mindfulness and meditation and everything there. So I moved back to LA and been working as a therapist. I'm an associate psychotherapist right now, just finishing up my hours and yeah, just having a great time supporting people with religious trauma, rocking the boat, taking shots at religious fundamentalism, all of that.
That's awesome. Well, I think one of these days you're going to get a knock on the door from me. I'll be very glad to receive some of your wisdom on a one-on-one basis. But I'm so glad you're here to kind of share some wisdom with us as a group. I know that there's probably some different things that are on your heart. So if there's anything that I ask about and you want to steer these questions a little bit differently based on kind of what your focus has been, please feel free to reshape these questions. But I do have some questions just to kind of kick us off, and then we'll just see where the wind blows in our conversation. But you write a lot about religious trauma. You talk a lot about how it can shatter our identity, our belonging, our sexuality, and our sense of reality. And when you talk to people and just study this stuff, and someone first starts to wake up inside of that collapsed structure, like how does it go? Like what is the nature of religious trauma? Is it more that their theology is the big issue that's breaking? Is it more their nervous system? Is it their trust in themselves, or kind of all the above and a lot more? Like how do you see the religious trauma escape experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything that you said and more, because Christian fundamentalism functions as a total identity system. So it informs literally every aspect of your being, and the Bible describes your relationship with God as a master-slave relationship, literally. So it's essentially a narcissistic power structure in the religion, which means that control is established through breaking down your sense of self, and kind of creating reliance on an outside authority who is God, who is the religious text, who are the religious leaders. And basically you outsource your identity to this religious system, in every way: your sexuality, your beliefs, your community, often your career. Uh, every aspect of your being is under the control of the deity, of this dark lord, if you will. Uh, and it's a very abusive relationship. It's a very abusive dynamic. And so uh, people coming out of this often say, I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. Like I feel like I'm lost, or I just don't know. And because like your ego structure, especially if you grew up in Christianity, or even if you just spent a significant amount of time in the religion, your ego structure is kind of like a we-go. It's like a group identity. And there's even in cult studies, there's something known as a pseudo personality that's developed by abusive authoritarian power structures, where it's this kind of spiritual Christian persona. That's literally your identity that's being formed and created in conjunction with this group identity. So often, if you're talking to people who are really in that dynamic, you'll just hear everything God, Jesus, and all this language, and it's like it's almost like a shell of a person. You're like, who are you as a person outside of this religion? Well, often we don't know because we didn't even get to have that experience. So coming out of that is a shock for a lot of people. I know it was for me in a big way. So it can feel like you're losing everything at once. There's a grieving process, an anger process, a process of recognizing the abuses and what happened, and really starting to regain your sense of self, to choose yourself, to say, what do I want here? What is my authenticity here that was lost to this group?
Hmm. It's amazing when you just start to. I mean, when you just start to even just jump in, it feels like so much of this, you just feel so manipulated. Like it's just like it's so much manipulation and so many lies. Do you feel like a lot of people end up at this starting point that you're talking about? Do you feel like most people are more angry or more sad, or like what is the range of emotions that typically people start with?
All of the above. I find that anger and grief tend to be kind of two sides of the same coin. So one of the first things that I do with people is to, I mean, just really encourage people to share their stories, to share it with another human being, to write it out, to really process and metabolize what happened. And anger is actually a really healthy stage in the process of recognizing abuse. And, one of the big aspects of religious fundamentalism too is it criminalizes emotions, and it categorizes emotions as bad or good or sinful or righteous, so we don't get to feel hatred or anger or disgust or bitterness or things like that, because they're seen as sinful, bordering on dangerous. But really, you know the full range of emotional expression is important. And so anger is one of those emotions where it lets us know where our boundary is. It lets us know where our no is, where our sense of alignment and authenticity is, and where things that are not okay for us are. So really giving voice to that anger, all the things that happened to me that I'm really pissed off about, is really important. And often underneath that anger, there's a lot of grief, and it's important to go through a grieving process, because for a lot of people such as myself, who spent most of our lives in this religion, I spent most of my career and studies in this religion, it's a huge loss, even if it's symbolic. Uh, there's a process even of like grieving the death of God, even if you view that as imaginary, which I do, that whole kind of imaginary friend type thing, it was still real to you. It was still a really significant source of comfort and hope, and the community and everything. So really allowing ourselves space to grieve and to acknowledge this is a real loss is a really important step.
And by the way, as we're chatting here with Andrew, there are some comments I'm going to pop up on the screen. Some of them that are longer, I might hold off and read them just because I don't want to distract too much. If it's just a quick, like 5 or 6 words, I'll pop it up. If it's a sentence or 2 or 3, I might hold off and just read it. But just to keep our wonderful viewers in the conversation, Cold Iron Gaming. My parents didn't like it when I told them their God was an authoritarian and a totalitarian, but they also couldn't refute it. Yeah, very true. I'll just read these I'll catch this up real quick, and then you can comment on any if you want to. Religion's a poison for the human soul. Janine says anger is essential. They weaponize anger against you, acting like it's a character flaw. It can be a doorway to where you need to go. And Noel, Fire and Believer, says, hey, Andrew, thank you so much for the essential work you're doing and helping people to escape the traps of Christianity that are baited with shame. Yeah, well said. And looks like 2 more have come in. Well, we got a lot of comments tonight. You're a popular guy here. This is great for all these comments. I appreciate the community so much for showing up tonight. I know there's a lot of things to do for a lot of you for Sunday nights, getting your kids ready for school and all that. So it's a commitment, and I appreciate you all for doing that. Love Dr. Pepper, Geography and Motor says, for me, the loss is not religion, but the time I wasted in religion being someone I wasn't to appease God. And it's hard for me to get in touch with anger. They do a good job of acting like they are innocent people of God. Yeah. So if you want to comment on any of those, and then I'll got a couple more questions for you to dig us a little deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so about anger, I mean, it can be difficult to get in touch with anger because of our fear of these emotions that's often cultivated with the indoctrination. Anger is a sin. Do not let the sun go down in your anger. Things like this. So, I mean, anger is one of those things. It can be destructive. It's not good to just let your anger out on other people. So when we just kind of let it loose and let ourselves live in that reactivity and take it out on other people, that can be harmful, obviously. But it's healthy and safe to feel any emotion. There's no emotion that's dangerous. So we can feel really, really big feelings and be okay and be safe, and learning how to regulate our emotions is an important step in recovery, and to accept them and to get curious about them, to be mindful about them, because that's how we discover our truth, our authentic sensing of reality, which is something that is compromised and intentionally broken down in religious manipulation. Your heart is wicked and depraved above all things, the Bible says, and we're taught that you have original sin, that your nature is tainted and untrustworthy, and so there are all these ways of breaking down your autonomy. What?
You froze there for 1 second, Andrew. I'm sorry. Yep, you're back.
Okay, great. So there are all these ways of breaking down your autonomy and sense of self, and a lot of the recovery work is about just tuning into your own sensing of reality, and that includes really getting in touch with your emotions.
Do you find, on that note, that sometimes the well has been poisoned for a lot of us because we're, in many circles of Christianity, I think we're sort of taught to be suspicious of any kind of therapy or counseling that's not strictly biblical, and anything that might be, not directly leading you to the gospel or to the Bible is sort of seen as like it's secular. It might even be atheist. It might be more woo woo, but like, and you end up almost getting this sense like that if you really dive into your emotions, you're kind of maybe exposing you're being a weakling, and it's it's just too squishy or whatever. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's touchy feely, and you end up thinking if you do have to kind of touch that world of getting to your emotions, it's like you just kind of do it. Like if I could just do it for one session with my therapist or 2 sessions, like that's the hard work. And it might be like, no, this is work you might do for a couple of years. But do you find that some people are just suspicious of that whole digging into those levels?
In a big way. That's one of the biggest things that comes up when I sit with people as a therapist is their fear of getting in touch with what's underneath the surface. And a lot of that can have to do with actually fear of demonic possession that's often cultivated in religion. This whole idea that if you let go of mental control, if you're not in your head and your thoughts and trying to control things mentally or ideologically, that you're going to be literally taken over by an evil force. or Christian fundamentalism demonizes other ideologies, other religions, other philosophies, other worldviews, and a lot of these contain some of the most potent ways of healing that are on the planet, because they're not sanctioned by the power structure, because they're not in conformity with the religion, and because they lead people to have experiences that don't cohere with the religion. So there's a reason for that. When people get in touch with their intuition, with their sexual desire, or have kind of non-ordinary states of consciousness through whatever practices, through breath work, through meditation, or secular philosophy and psychology. So many of these things just don't line up with the religious ideology, and it also goes with this conformity to this deity, to this demagogue who is God, who is essentially a fascistic monarch, whose the whole basis of his rule is loyalty, is fealty to the deity, to the king. So it's very much based around conformity and allegiance to him. So anything that's other is demonized and seen as evil, and because it might lead his subjects to stray and to worship other gods, which is anything else that isn't in alignment with this narcissistic ruler.
Do you find that sometimes some of the people that you might come across, or even in your own experience, like that some of the biggest breakthroughs aren't as much just like feeling it, but just finding the words for it? Like I sometimes think, because I spend so much time thinking about and watching videos about and studying and just sort of reflecting on things like childhood trauma and things like attachment issues, that I naturally come across people like yourself and other people who end up having the language that you're like taking all these emotions that people like I would have, but there's all of a sudden new verbiage that comes in the equation, and all of a sudden I'm like, that's what I was feeling, but I did not know how to say that. But then Andrew said it, and like, that's it. Like, you gave me the words. You didn't take the words out of my mouth. You put them in there for me. But like, now that I know that that's what this is, and especially when you're talking about things like uh, indoctrination and manipulation, you're talking about just all kinds of ways that we are lied to, as well as propaganda, as well as just this utter mixing of things where love equals abuse. God's love is he's loving because even though he's abusive, because he's doing it for your ultimate good. And all of these psychological concepts are twisted on their heads. And then you learn what it means for someone to be a narcissist or to be a psychopath. And you learn what it means when someone is controlling someone else. And then it's like, wow, like now I know what I went through. I felt what I went through, but I didn't really know how to say it. And then the words are there, like, yes, now I finally have something to grab onto, and it doesn't finish the process, but it starts it,
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, exactly. I think it can be incredibly validating, when someone puts words to your experience, because it can feel like it's not just me. Like there's something actually happening here, and I'm not just making this up, and there's a reason for all this, and this is why. So having that structure can be incredibly freeing and assuring, and helpful. And so in therapy, we talk about two approaches. There's a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. So a top-down is kind of working at the level of ideas and ideologies, and restructuring beliefs. So if you believe in something that's distorted or negative about yourself or about other people, that's going to result in altering your experience in a way that's negative, in harm. And then the bottom up approach is kind of working at the level of the body and the emotions, and that our experience is very much embodied. It's very much emotional, and we store trauma in our bodies, at really at all layers of our being. Trauma impacts all layers of our being. So I think it's important to have both. And so, but a lot of transformation happens through our experience. So this is why I'm in favor of embodied healing methods, of somatic work, breath work, of experiential inquiry, because it can hit these kind of deeper layers of our experience. And interestingly enough, I found that in fundamentalist Christianity, I never got an experiential transformation. Like it was always promising this victorious life and this transformed emotional experience. And that's one of the biggest things that caused me to leave the religion, was that it didn't deliver the goods.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was one of the biggest issues for me. It wasn't necessarily the main impetus for my deconversion, but it was one of those, when you look back and you kind of say, what were the early seeds that maybe made me eventually ask this question or that question? That was exactly one of mine, as well as, why don't I have the joy of the Lord? And it's been decades in this religion, and of course it wasn't a religion, it was a relationship. But if it's been decades, then there should be some consistent sense of, despite the ups and downs and the waves and the storms of life, I should pretty much feel solid. And of course, they gaslight you a lot. Well, if there's an issue, it's not with God, because he's right there loving you, but you gaslight yourself. But eventually, like, you know what? No, I'm sincerely doing the right thing. I'm on the right path. And there's still not this sense of joy or peace or whatever. And then it does it when you have it long enough, and you start to see other people don't have it either. You realize, again, there is something wrong there. That wasn't the path that got me out all the way, but it certainly was one small seed on the journey, at least in the early part. You mentioned all those ways, that the things that you do in your therapy. Could we take a quick sidebar to one of them? Shadow work is something that I've heard that term before, and I know very little about it. Do you mind just explaining what shadow work is, and explain if you use that, and then just kind of what someone that might think that that's an appropriate method to pursue, like what would they practically experience with a therapist going through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so shadow work, well, the idea of the shadow is something that was developed by the Swiss psychiatrist and therapist Carl Jung. And so the shadow is exactly what it sounds like. It's the aspects of our personality, of our ego, of our experience that we're not aware of. So it refers to anything that we repress or avoid or push down out of our conscious awareness, uh, or that we're just not aware of, that's somehow influencing our experience, either because it's considered shameful or immoral, or we just are ignorant of it. So it's kind of like in the shadow. It's outside of the light of awareness, if you will. So just using the metaphor of light and dark for your awareness or lack of awareness, your lack of consciousness. So Carl Jung said that one of the keys to what he called individuating, which was kind of developing into yourself, your most evolved and healed and whole self, who's functioning and living in the world in accordance with your nature, uh, really in a more ideal whole state, is bringing the shadow aspects of your experience into consciousness. So shining the light of awareness onto the shadow. And that's essentially the essence of what healing work is, I would say, is and the way that we do that is by paying attention to our repetitive painful patterns or our symptoms. Where do I keep getting stuck in relationships with other people, or having a lot of reactivity, anger, anxiety, depression, or finding myself in the same kind of relationships over and over again, and bringing curiosity to those experiences. And what we tend to find is that whenever we have some kind of extreme emotional reaction, there's trauma there, which trauma is essentially an unhealed wound, uh, painful experiences that we've had in the past that haven't been fully processed, that we just kind of carry with us, almost like there's a wound and there's like we have a scab over it, but it's still kind of festering underneath the surface. And we just find ourselves being triggered by these situations that are familiar to those wounds. And so by kind of going against the grain, by applying curiosity to our fears, to our avoidance, to our painful repetitions, we can kind of trace those symptoms back to the original events and find healing and end up resolving and gaining awareness and insight into some of these patterns. And so this is kind of the opposite too of the Christian idea of sin. Christianity tends to say that, you have a problem because you are the problem, which is basically giving you a shame-based identity. It's saying you're a sinner, you're broken, you're depraved. And so your healing comes through surrendering to an outside source, it literally being possessed by an outside entity, kind of psychological spirit possession, being possessed by the Holy Spirit and being a slave of God, of this. So it's a kind of like a demonic possession, if you will, or you could say like a psychological spirit control, to use the metaphor, the religious metaphor in that way.
Hmm.
So
Just amazing when you think through this stuff that you're talking about, like how much of what we do is based on our need to avoid our fears or to avoid, the sense of punishment. Um,
Mhm.
and it's amazing to me how many aspects of us are truly buried. And I wanted to just mention something I've been reflecting on quite a bit and see if you have any thoughts on it. But the movies by Disney, Inside Out,
Yes,
the
although
girl, it's like
yeah,
the girl lives her life.
I
You haven't
haven't
seen it?
actually watched them. No, I
Okay.
need to. I
Well,
should.
I recommend them because I think you'd probably be like, the therapist put this script together, and I'm sure they did either put it together or consult therapists to do it. But you basically have like the world of this young girl who's living her life. She's switching schools. She's trying to fit in with the ice skating team, but in her head is like this control room, and it's got a big computer, and you've got a personality of joy and anger and sadness and all the other characters. And eventually, as she ages and gets to teenage years, some more people join the crowd. But you have like this computer that like they're there to control her responses. And when you watch it, it makes you think there's like all these deeper levels that we don't think about, that are pulling the strings, that are, you know, pushing the buttons. And one of the things that I reflect on a lot, and this is what I wanted to get to, I feel like when I look at Christians, my thought towards them is, if you don't escape, then you are in danger of never living a day of your life for real. You have always lived within this structure of your identity is, you know, a child of God, connected through Christ. I'm a saved sinner, but you don't just get to be you. And one of the fears I have is that a lot of us who deconstruct and deconvert and can say on a belief level, on a conscious level, that's mythology, we might be tempted to think we've done all the hard work, but our focus has been on the academics of the mythology behind Christianity, and the fact that this is a worldview that should not dominate us, and it's basically irrelevant. And we kind of think that's the big deal. We escaped Christianity. And yet on the worldview level, the deeper psychological shadow work level, perhaps, it's still there. Like the roots are still there. It's still pulling the punches. There's still a residue. There's still stains. And so we would be in danger of being truly deconverted people who say with our mouths, Christianity is mythology and it is irrelevant to our lives, but it's actually not gone yet. It's still pushing buttons inside of our heads. And just if you have any thoughts reflecting on how I'm seeing that, I'd love to.
In a big way. Yeah. So let me just kind of finish up that that last thought as well, and then I'll jump on this point. So you know, Christianity says that the problem is you, that your suffering is basically a function of your identity, that you're a sinner, that you're evil, that your nature is tainted and corrupt. So one thing I like about a lot of Eastern philosophies is that they say that suffering is a function of ignorance, lack of awareness, which is essentially what Carl Jung says. Avidya is a Sanskrit word which means ignorance, basically. So people do things that are immoral or that are harmful to themselves or others because we lack awareness, we lack consciousness. Or we have stuff that just hasn't been resolved. So it's not that you're bad. It's just that something in your experience is unprocessed, unconscious, unhealed. And so the kind of affirming that our nature is more or less good, that which I believe that people want the best for themselves and others when they're resourced, when they're healed. That kind of, you could say, goodness is inherent. Obviously, we have the capacity for things that aren't good, but why do we do that? Because of some unconsciousness, some unconscious patterns, whether it's things we picked up from our culture, from our background, from different harmful ideologies, so for things like that, or from trauma and other things. One of the therapies that I use is something known as internal family systems, or IFS. And what I really like about that modality is what it does is it kind of says that the qualities of God, if you will, of goodness, of curiosity, creativity, compassion, love, are within us. That we have these kind of qualities of awareness when we're in a resourced state, and that we can bring these qualities of awareness to the painful aspects of our experience and heal ourselves that way, recognizing that the things that we've supernaturalized or outsourced to God are actually human. So kind of reclaiming the divinity that we've kind of outsourced or put outside ourselves, if you want to use that term metaphorically. I mean, if you don't, that's fine too. You could just say these really amazing qualities that we all have access to when our nature is unhindered.
Yeah, and certainly we've outsourced our autonomy, for sure, at the very least.
I'm not sure if I answered your question too. I know you asked another question.
Yeah, no, that was good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off from the earlier question. I was looking at both the comments and some notes, and I think I may have jumped in a little bit too early. But just the idea too of like everything you've just said. But do you feel like in some ways we are in danger as former Christians of having done so much work that we think, even though that work is monumental and it is critical, you can't get to the next stage without jumping through the hoops of is Jesus and Yahweh real, and are they real? Is the Bible divine? You have to get through that. But once you get through that, it's like that iceberg idea. You have touched the tip of the iceberg, but there's still more, a little bit that you can see, but there's really a lot more under the water, and that we are in danger as ex-Christians of thinking that we have basically reclaimed our lives, and in some ways we have not, because the Christianity, like the movie Inside Out, and I think you'll love it, but there's still Christianity is still pushing some buttons and still pulling levers
100%.
and saying, like, you could say, for example, I am definitely not ashamed of my sexuality anymore, my sexual desires, whatever, my fantasies, my lusts. I am completely fine with it. And it's like, and you can mentally go through those hoops and say, there was never a reason to be ashamed of my thought life, or of masturbation. Like, it's just fine.
Yeah.
And you can truly, like, on a surface level, even feel like you're doing fine, but it's almost like you have to figure out some way to say, is there something else deeper inside of me? And I know, we tend to be like, oh, that's woo woo, but I don't think that we're doing ourselves, right by cutting that off too quickly. And one thing I've mentioned that I like to do, I don't do it anywhere near enough, is I will literally just stare at a mirror, not my full face, but it's like eyes to eyes to myself, and say, tell the truth, Tim. How are you really feeling? What's really
Yeah.
going on inside your head? But it's like, whether you do that or whatever, you just talk to a therapist, like, you almost need to say to yourself, I could escape Christianity, but still not reclaim my identity because its tentacles are still controlling me,
100%. I mean, I still find, like, Christian songs and Bible verses popping in my head in the shower, like, I mean, this stuff is deep in us for a lot of us, so it's never going to entirely go away. And that's okay, it's not all bad. Uh, but yes, absolutely. I think it's an ongoing process, and it's okay, to be continuing doing deeper layers of this work. And sometimes we can have an all or nothing view about the healing process, like I'm either there or I'm not. But uh, just the more you engage in it, the more benefit you're going to get from it. So even if you encounter a deeper layer in 10 years, that's okay. But absolutely, I mean, it does affect us in major ways, especially shame. I mean, there's a lot of ways. One of the big ways is a pretty severe inner critic, I found, with working with a lot of people and in my own experience, uh, because just God is this persecutory figure in the religion. God is both really good and evil. He's both God and Satan in so to speak, in terms of the religion. I mean, you've got this all-loving figure who's also a maniacal psychopath, who's a genocider, who all these things, and who loves you unconditionally but will burn you with fire forever if you leave him. So but this figure is extremely wrathful and severe, and polices your thoughts, polices your behavior, and purifies your thoughts and your behavior, and and just the commandments and the perfection, the moral perfection that's required, and the level of dehumanization, it's very, very severe. So uh, what we do in order to keep ourselves safe is we internalize this God figure into a part of our psychology. Freud called it the superego. It's kind of this part of us that kind of is like a moral guide, in a way, that kind of informs our morality and makes sure we're okay in that way, or these protective part of our personality that can be very severe. And so we can easily develop this kind of perfectionism, this extreme self-criticism, this extreme critical inner voice. And a lot of that has to do with the religion often. So a big part of that healing process is being more kind to ourselves, being more compassionate when we make mistakes, not having such just high and unrealistic standards. I found that's a big piece of work that often is deeper for many people, even leaving the religion, just how hard they can be on themselves.
Yeah, that was a great point. I love too how when you escape, you really begin to see that you've been doing that, and also that you've been sort of your own police. Like you were in jail; it was a prison for your mind, but you were also on the levels you're talking about. You were your own policeman. You were your own guard to make sure you stayed, really guilty for all the things you did. And it's one of the hardest parts about this, I think, for me, is the acknowledgement that so much of it feels invisible, like to see your real motivations. And I think I've used this illustration before, and it's a little bit more of the intense side, but I won't tell the full story. But just to give it in summary, I've used it a lot recently because I think we've been talking about stuff like this on my channel. I know you haven't been on the channel for a couple of years, but some of these topics have become a little bit more front and center for me recently in terms of my healing. And I was talking about a piano teacher I had years ago, where it was supposed to be a class of 3 or 4 or 5 students, but I was the only one that signed up for that time slot, and he said, "We can keep it. We'll just do one-on-one." Great man. But one day he was talking with me, and he said, "Turn off your piano. We need to talk. Like, you're not doing very well. I can just see it on your face. Like, you need to talk." And I did. And he asked me like 10 different questions, and then he got real quiet and he said, "I want to ask you one final question." And he said, "You feel absolutely worthless, don't you?" Now, if you had asked me that in terms of theology, I would have said, "I'm a child of the king. I've got all the worth in the world." My belief system said I'm worthy. But he was digging down into the shadow work level, unwittingly perhaps, but he was digging down, and he was getting to not my beliefs and my profession, but my worldview. And he was saying, "You feel absolutely worthless, don't you?" And I mean, I didn't even have to answer. I just started crying. I was like, "Yes, I feel absolutely worthless. And while I declare I am so worthy and I've got so much worth because of God, I feel absolutely worthless." And I use that to say, I think there's some times when the truth of what we're really dealing with it's invisible to us unless we really do this hard work. But also it's sometimes almost the polar opposite of what we think is actually going on. You know? It's crazy.
100%. This is why getting in touch with our felt sense, like you're like that felt sense of that emotion and where you're feeling it in your body, is so important. And again, one of the things the religion represses, because it has to do with real healing and transformation, partly. And I think there just isn't that awareness there. There's just kind of a very primitive psychology of healing and transformation in a lot of the religion. But one of the patterns I see too is that we people who leave, including myself, can be overly intellectualized. We can be overly identified with ideology in a way that blocks us from doing deeper inner work. So, I mean, I love ideology. Obviously, I'm a total nerd and do tons of study. And ideology is important and matters. Truth matters. All of that. That being said, there's a way in which we can avoid our experience by being overly intellectualized. It's actually a psychological defense mechanism. And for a lot of us, we can be really in our head because that can feel safer than to be with uncomfortable feelings and emotions. And so,
You're preaching to the choir, man.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel you.
So, a lot of healing methods that I'm really a fan of have to do with just getting into that felt sense, that embodied sense, that raw, unpleasant sensation and emotions. And so this is why I like things like breath work, like altered states of consciousness, or just embodied practices, again, that are often demonized by the religion or seen as of the devil, or even just sitting with yourself, like letting go of the mind. It's like a demon could come and take over. Well, what you're sitting with yourself, how's something going to take over just because you stop trying to control your experience with your thoughts? But that is the teaching. You can't like open yourself up to influence. You have to be so like mentally controlled, so in ideology, and that we lose access to what you could call your intuition, your kind of natural flow of experience, of emotion and embodied sense. So ideology and thinking is one important way that we navigate the world. I'm a huge fan of critical thinking, so I don't mean to negate it, but we also have all these other aspects of our being, our felt sense, what our bodies are telling us, what you could call your intuition, which is kind of like this just combined sense of all your faculties that your brain's kind of outputting. And so, one of the hard things coming out of religion is how do I make decisions now that I'm not being told what to do, or that I'm not waiting for something to pop into my head and this is the answer and I have to impulsively act it out. It's by tuning into all our faculties. So considering the critical thinking, does this make sense? Does it, cohere with logic and reason and science? But also your own values, your own felt sense, your own body, everything. So I do think something that can block us, though, is kind of staying at the level of the mind and ideology. And so that's why I'm a fan of embodied ways of relating and experiencing, and what people call those or how they relate to them ideologically matters less to me personally, than whether or not they're experiencing a transformational effect.
Do you find that most people who would go to the level of looking at psychedelics with you, that most people are really, really sort of afraid of sort of how that whole process works? Because I know that, to me, it just seems like such an interesting world, and I kind of like, I wish I could at least explore it a little bit more, but I feel like there's so many questions I have about it. I actually had a friend, I used to work with a friend from just right on the corner, and he still works there, but I moved on. But he and I touch base every few months, and he was telling me, he's like, "Tim, I got to tell you, I had an experience." I was like, "What?" And he said, "My wife and I did this thing where," he said, "it was like frog, this venom or frog blood or spit or something." But he's
Oh.
like, we did it. He's like, they just put it like in our shoulders or something, on our backs. And he said, "I'm telling you, I went to a whole different place in my mind." And he said, "It took all of my desire, like, not in a bad sense, like, it's all my
Mhm.
desire and anxiety away." And he's like, "I'm a literal different person because of this experience." And then I said, "Well, you know what? I wanna talk to you a month later. I wanna see when this is worn out of your system." And I talked to him a month later. He's like, "Nah, I feel the same way." A month later, same thing. No difference. And I'm very curious, but at the same time, I'm very hesitant. I'm not asking in the truest sense of like I'm about to go jump into it, but for anyone that is thinking, I think that some of the psychedelic paths might actually be helpful, but I'm afraid. What would you say to somebody that's on that fence?
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the fear makes sense. I think pretty much everyone who first starts working with these healing modalities, uh, and they're referred to as medicines in the traditions in the community who work with them, and in the indigenous communities that work with them, they're referred to as medicine, or even the word sacrament, which is like a religious term, but it's like a conduit of grace or something like that. But you can again, the ideology doesn't matter to me. People have all different ways of viewing these experiences. So someone might view it in a mystical or spiritual way, or someone might say, this is just the brain generating these patterns. What I care more about is, okay, what is the felt transformative effect to you, and how does it fit within your worldview, and in a healthy way? So, but I mean, it's important to work with these things in a safe way. I mean, they're powerful, so I wouldn't recommend for your first time just going out and doing them by yourself. In a supportive container with maybe a professional facilitator, or in a ceremony that's professionally facilitated by professionals, that's structured. So having that safety and making sure there are no psychological contraindications, history of psychosis or bipolar disorder are generally contraindicated, and just other things that you'd want to check out. Um, But apart from that, you can work safely and maybe in a lower dose and in a supportive way. And fear is part of the process. There's often a fear of the unknown and of kind of letting go of control and sitting with discomfort, but that can be very healing in and of itself, and having that fear transmuted.
Good answer. I appreciate that very much. For anyone that's sort of in the same boat as me, as like some of the stuff is still pretty new to even contemplate, let alone do. I appreciate you giving us a little bit of a starting point to think through it.
Yeah, and I'm not the kind of person who says like you have to do this. Like there are many different ways of accessing healing that are available. So this is one path that I think is one of the most powerful ones. But it's not for everyone. So whatever you're curious about in your path, and whatever you're feeling drawn to, I'm all about honoring your own sense of reality, going with what's calling you, and not just somebody saying this is the thing to do.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm very much on those part of the slope that would just say I'm just studying it. I probably wouldn't do it for quite a few years, but it's definitely something that when the time is right, I guess I'll know. But I do want to jump to another topic. But before I do, I'll give you the topic, and then I'm going to jump to some comments so we don't get too far behind on them. But we're going to talk about how sometimes you've referred to how sin is psychologically naive. So we'll go back to that topic in just a minute. But just in terms of catching up on the comments, looks like, we're not doing too bad. Just got a few here. Let's see here. Where did I leave off? Okay, yeah. Anger leads to the dark side. Yep, Darth Vader. I have struggled with that since leaving, and they do blood magic for him. Yep. Hola, great to see you, Henry. Some great points. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate you being here. It's great having so many options. Thank you. Why does it seem like everyone else was so joyful? Yeah, everyone else has the joy of the Lord, but I've shared this before, but being a Bible college graduate and being in the pastoral ministries group at both an ultra-conservative school, Bob Jones University, as well as more of a conservative but comparatively liberal school, Lancaster Bible College in central Pennsylvania. Like when you look at the small group Bible studies that the pastoral students, like the cream of the crop, supposedly, like what they talk about behind closed doors, the sense that everyone's joyful is not real. The sense that everyone's conquering sin is not real. They are struggling, and they're living two lives. Most people that I came across in the pastoral departments of those schools would say we live two lives. We live the front life that's very pure and very clean and very easy and straightforward. The other life is, effectively just thinking dirty thoughts and then repenting for it and then getting on that cycle. But see here, Cold Iron Gaming was saying, I was trying to place who Andrew reminded me of, but now I see he reminds me of Neil Patrick Harris. Okay. I can see that a little bit. Yeah.
I may have heard that once or twice before.
Janine says, I'm so glad you're talking about shadow work on your channel. Tim, this is amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, Andrew is just I love it's been too long. We need to make sure it's not too long before the third visit. Inside Out is about a girl from Minnesota on the hockey team. Yep. Great movies. My kids love them. Love the Inside Out movies. They did consult a stellar neuro research team, still a helpful emotional growth model for those of us in recovery. Stephen, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Susanna in Scotland, staying up late to do this. I appreciate you being here, Susanna. Yay, Stephen, good to see you and everyone. Clyde Donovan, a super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support, Clyde. And both of you are awesome, he says. Thank you so very much. And Cold On Gaming, some Christian songs just have fun, catchy tunes. Yeah, it's true. There's a song that I play sometimes, not much, maybe like once every 6 months, but there's a lady named Jen Johnson. I think she's either Bethel Music or one of those, but she has a song that like doesn't even mention God or Jesus or anything. It's just called "It's Gonna Be Okay." And honestly, because of the tune being catchy, but also the message, like "It's Gonna Be Okay," that song can sort of quote unquote minister to me. It's crazy, but thankfully, I mean, I wouldn't see it the same way if it mentioned Jesus and God, but she's very light on that. John, great to see you. I just stumbled into this. Hi to both of you. Thank you so much, John, for being here. Janine says, be gentle and don't be afraid to move slowly. Some people become afraid of feelings they never left. Maybe work with a somatic therapist. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of that, of working gently and at a pace that works for us with difficult emotions. You know, a lot of our fear and avoidance is there for a reason. Maybe we've experienced a lot of overwhelm and overwhelming emotional pain in the past, and so kind of working with your system at a pace that works for you is also a good thing. We don't just need to dive straight into our deepest trauma and take this bulldozer kind of approach. I mean, that can work too at times, but yeah, I do work with people in a more kind of gradual way, a titrated way.
Yeah, I can definitely see that being critical, especially for those of us where the trauma is so deep that facing it head on might just be, too much. I've shared recently, again, some of these topics we're talking about have kind of been in the air in a much lighter sense in some of the things we've been touching on, but I was talking through my story through some of the live streams, just going, instead of like an interview where I do my story in one quick hour and a half, I've been just kind of like picking one little piece of my story and just kind of slowly chatting about all aspects of it. But talking about how at one point my dad told me that he wished I'd never been born. And I was talking about how that gets in your psyche, as you're a teenager, to hear that. And it's like some of these things you think I can deal with them on the deepest or on a surface level, but if I really dig deep, some of this stuff, and maybe for me that is or is not a big deal. I don't know at this point. I've dealt with it so many years that it's like it's commonplace. But for some people, dealing with some of those experiences and some of those memories, it might just like open the floodgates, and you do have to be careful that you can't take too much at one time, because it's a lot, and you wouldn't want to get to the point where you're re-traumatizing yourself by just trying to speed the process up. It didn't happen quickly. It's not going to unhappen quickly.
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to wrap these comments up real quick, just so I don't get too far behind. I'm really in need of deep therapy to get in touch with my feelings. Susanna, yep. Preaching to the choir here. Great to see you, Private. Thank you so much for joining me. This is exciting for me to see. Thank you, John. Yeah, I'm so glad Andrew's here. Great to see you, Psychology, and Stephen. Shrooms are awesome in moderation. Yeah.
Agreed.
Wanted to get to a question of sin. You talk sometimes about sin being psychologically naive, which is obviously a very provocative phrase. It's a good way to put it. In what sense do you think Christianity sort of gets this disastrously wrong about human behavior, where, like, what framework should replace the concept of sin if we still want to talk seriously about harm and accountability and moral growth, but yet not get into this psychologically naive perspective?
So here's what Christianity does. Say you have like a dog and you leave some food out on the counter, and the dog like eats the food, and then you go and say, "Bad dog, bad dog. I hate you. You're awful. You're wrong. You're bad." What does that do? Do you think your message is really getting across to the dog? I mean, maybe a little bit, right? But it's kind of like that. I mean, that may have some basic level of effectiveness, like very, very basic. Okay, like there's a bad feeling, and maybe the dog kind of gets the message, or maybe it just feels really bad and doesn't understand what's going on and just kind of cowers away and you feel a little bit better. That's sort of what like the Christian idea of sin and calling you a sinner does. I mean, it's like someone pointing the finger and saying, "You're bad, you're wrong, stop doing that." I mean, maybe it can help for some things. Okay, I didn't realize that was harmful. I should stop doing that. That can help with some things, but like when it comes to like our real deep issues that we keep doing and that we struggle with, or like addictions or compulsions or avoidance or fear or trauma or whatever, it's like it's not going to really help you. It's just going to make you feel awful about yourself. And that's sort of what the idea of sin is saying. It's you did something bad, you're bad. You did it bad because you're bad. And so now you're going to feel worse about yourself, and you're going to have this shame identity on top of the unwanted behavior or thing that you're doing. And it just perpetuates the cycle. Actually, shame perpetuates the cycle rather than addressing it. So, I mean, it's important to be able to recognize that when we have a problem, to name the problem, kind of first step of getting help is having some level of awareness, right? So saying this is a problem is a good thing. But that's I really like non-pathologizing approaches that say there's an issue, but it's not you. So this whole sin framework is saying that you're the problem, that your nature is the problem, something about you is off. And so again, you can take like a mindfulness based approach, these Eastern philosophies that say the problem is ignorance. And in mindfulness, there's a word known as Maitri in Sanskrit, metta in Pali. It means literally friendliness or loving kindness. It gets translated often as loving kindness. It's kind of this quality of awareness that we want to cultivate towards ourselves, like the quality of awareness that you would have towards a friend who's suffering and who's saying, I'm really having a hard time with this problem. This awful thing happened. And, naturally you'd sit with them and be like, I'm really sorry for you. That's really hard. And we want to be able to bring that quality of awareness, that mindful, compassionate, friendly awareness to every aspect of our experience, especially the ones that we dislike the most, because having that takes away the shame so that we can actually look at the thing and get curious and bring compassion and curiosity and figure out what's going on and change the pattern. Really, not only is the idea of sin naive, it actually prevents the healing that the religion wants to accomplish by pathologizing people.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing to think this stuff had our hearts and our attention and everything for years. You've used the idea before of psychological spirit possession, which is a pretty interesting phrase. How can we, at this point, especially as deconverted people, how can we tell if something is it's like truly our conviction about something versus like an identity that has been sort of colonized by a group or an ideology or like this God image? It's like stuck in our minds. It's kind of being used against us. How does psychological spirit possession work? And like, how do you talk it through with someone that's realizing that that's what's been going on?
Right. Yeah. Great question. I mean, on some level, we can't entirely know. So, so much of our experience is a result of our conditioning. I would say almost everything, is related to our cultural conditioning, our parental upbringing, what ideas we've been exposed to, and all of that. So, we can't ever get rid of our conditioning, and it's not even healthy to. Conditioning is also positive and beneficial. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's just awareness of. It's just a matter of continuing to cultivate awareness, continuing to learn, and getting curious about our experience when we're having pain or when we're suffering. Getting curious when there's some issue of pain or fear, kind of asking ourselves self-inquiry questions. Where did this fear come from? Have I felt this fear before? Are there earlier times in my life when I felt this way? And as we're inquiring about our pain and our trauma and our fear or depression or whatever, there will often be these memories that emerge, or it could be of an event we went through or some kind of conditioning. I read this in a book somewhere, or somebody told me this thing, so it could be cultural conditioning or just stuff that we picked up. And so when you become aware of that and it feels connected to pain or unhealth in your life, then it's a good idea to question, is this something that's good for me or not? It's kind of it's really kind of simple in a way, looking at these ideas and looking at the impacts that they're having on you. Is this resulting in wholeness and happiness and freedom, or is it resulting in suffering? And so often, not everything is that simple, but a lot of it is. So really, uh, I want to say that like learning to trust yourself is actually really simple on a basic level. Um, it's kind of tuning into, how does this feel in my body? What are its effects in my life? Does it feel positive? Does it feel negative? And often it's that simple.
Hmm.
Not always. I mean, there are complex things too, but you know, it's also very basic.
Yeah. It's amazing how some of the most basic things we find ways to make complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
On a lot of levels. I'm gonna read a few quick comments because I think at least I saw one or two that I think is related to what we're talking about. But let's see here. Tessent Decken, if I'm saying that correctly, greetings from Switzerland. Thank you so much for being here. And I like these talks. Thank you so much. Understanding psychology, however, didn't know I was ignorant. Yeah.
Oh, so I want to the term ignorance, the way that I'm using it, what I mean by it is just lack of awareness.
Yeah.
So I don't mean something like really negative. So the term that it's used in these philosophies and contexts too is ignorance. It just means like the reason that we end up doing things we don't want to do is because we at some level lack awareness. We're not aware of something.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely feel like I'm aware of that I'm unaware. It's like it's that thing of I'm ignorant and I think I'm aware that I'm ignorant, but it's you have to at least admit it before you can at least try to figure out what you're ignorant of.
Yeah.
Susanna says this is amazing information. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm so glad Andrew's here. And gratitude is more important than love. Without gratitude, love is nothing. Janine says, I actually think they designed it to prevent our healing. It serves them to keep us fragmented.
It does, yeah.
And if I can't trust myself, then I can't trust anyone. Very true.
Exactly.
And then I'm a software engineer and God helps me program. Okay, I'm not sure what to think about that, but I thought I saw a comment that related more directly to this, but I may have missed it. But in terms of just going on through our topics tonight, the idea of the gospel, I just want to go there for a second because the gospel is front and center in our Christian experience. You're a sinner who deserves punishment. God's a savior who has provided a way to be rescued.
Yep.
You are owned by the master of slave sin as your taskmaster, and God will redeem you from the chopping block of sin. And so the gospel is everything to us. You know, everything is, will you bow your knee at the foot of the cross and accept that Christ died on your behalf? But you talk sometimes about how there is like this sense within the gospel messages that is very entrapping to people, where they get into this cycle of the victim, persecutor, rescuer, like this triangle. Mm-hmm. And when we start to see that pattern, that cycle, what sort of becomes possible, like once you see it, because it seems like that's in many ways the crux of a lot of the healing, is just to, again, have the words for it, and then to understand what do those words mean and how did they use this. Because I feel like it helps me a lot to say something was done to you and you were in a system, and mm-hmm. now that you're out of it, you're not going to really heal unless you understood what were they doing to you. And yep. I don't mean like necessarily the pastor was touching you in his office. I mean this, the whole system. Something was done to you. You were a cog in the machine, and you can say it's mythology and it's harmful, but until you specifically say, what did they do to me? And what specifically was this gospel cycle of victim, persecutor, rescuer? Like, how do you unpack that for people who are specifically coming from Christianity?
Yeah, exactly. So I actually wrote an article on my blog about this called How Christianity's Gospel That Jesus Died for Your Sins Creates a Victim, Persecutor, Rescuer Complex. So this idea of a drama triangle, I think it was Stephen Karpman or something like that, who came up with this idea of this kind of victim, persecutor, rescuer complex. So this is also the basis of narcissistic control and fascism. Fascism takes hold when people feel powerless, when they feel helpless, when socioeconomic conditions or psychological conditions are such that people are feeling really oppressed and really powerless. So they stop trusting themselves, and they choose to outsource their power, their sense of self, to some authority who comes in and says, I have the solution, I'm going to help. They present themselves as kind of this savior, this kind of strongman person. And there's this kind of deal with the devil that gets made, so to speak, where people are willing to surrender their authenticity, their freedom, their sense of selfhood in order to get this benefit of say, safety, stability, security, all the things that power structures promise, like religious or political power structures, or kind of narcissists. I'll be this strong savior figure. And then the narcissist comes in, and they'll be your rescuer, but they also break down your sense of self. They're also very persecutory, and so I mean, this is what we see in Christianity, and so part of the healing is recognizing when we're feeling powerless or helpless and hopeless. And that's typically when you're told to pray or to rely on the religion's rituals, confession, absolution, more Bible study, more of the religious solutions. And it's like, okay, where am I feeling powerless and helpless? And how can I resource myself? How can I take the things that I would kind of outsource and resource instead of outsourcing? Can I find the solution within myself, within my community, within greater humanity, with supports? And how can I get support in that emotional state without kind of giving myself up? Which is what, again, the control structure does. And we could talk more about that control structure too.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to also carve out a little time before we're at the very end to talk a little bit about political things, but just a little bit. Yeah. But it seems like it's so much in our face with the news, it's hard to avoid that topic entirely. In terms of, again, just going through some important topics, the idea of all this healing that we're trying to pursue, it seems like so much of it is wrapped up in the idea that unconditional love is there. When you look at original sin and just the whole idea of like the merit system, the meritocracy of it all, the shame culture, what does unconditional love sort of look like in practice for people, where you could argue my nervous system has only, despite their claims of it being an unconditional love, my nervous system has actually only known conditional love and conditional belonging. How do you bring unconditional love into some of these discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. So exactly, that's the irony, right? It promises unconditional love, but it's actually servitude. It's extremely conditional. It's loyalty based. It's based on submission and loyalty. If you obey me, if you follow my commands, I will love you. If not, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to burn you. I'm going to punish you. Right? That's that's not unconditional love. It's abuse. So I'd say the basis of unconditional love is acceptance. And acceptance is the starting point of healing. When we're able to bring curiosity to our experience, that's kind of the starting point of unconditional love. I'm going to accept myself, even and especially in the places that I most dislike or avoid. Right? I'm going to accept. I don't have to like it. I don't have to want it to stay, but I'm going to get curious. I'm going to bring that kind of loving awareness and treat myself like a loving parent would, like a loving friend would. I'm gonna comfort and be with and care for the part of myself that's having this pain or doing this thing that I don't want to do. And so that really begins with accepting, bringing this kind of compassionate, accepting, curious awareness to our experience, and recognizing that, again, taking the shame out of the picture, that we're all human, that we all are imperfect, that we're all healing, and that acceptance starts with where you are now, not where you want to be.
Good stuff. Yeah, It's amazing how much of us we have self-rejected without knowing it. I mean, they've really, when you get the message of the worm theology, as well as your heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, and then don't trust yourself, lean not on your own understanding, and just all those endless messages, it does such a number. And
Yeah,
to say,
and one of the big things that I take people through to is being selfish, quote unquote, being selfish. So again, what they do is they break down your sense of self. A lot of people will feel like, have this thought, I'm being selfish if I'm doing this, and I'm like, well, that's exactly the point. I want you to learn how to value yourself, because no one else can value us and advocate for our needs like we can as individuals. And so kind of our basis is self-valuation, is checking in with ourselves. What do I want and need in this experience and in this life? And if we don't do that, no one else will. Uh, and this also relates to boundaries work. But so kind of I mean, I guess the sort of positive in what they're saying is not being selfish is so there's like selflessness in terms of altruism, which is positive. Like you could speak in that way. Like, you know, you don't want to be selfish in terms of ignoring the needs of other people, and it can be really good and healthy to kind of, you know, go out of your way to help and do good things for other people. That's like the positive sense of the word selfless, right? And there's a negative sense of the word selfish that I can get behind. But the way that Christianity talks about it is like, is don't care for yourself, seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be given to you. Deny yourself, degrade yourself. It's self-degradation and self-negation. So we really need to reclaim, like, my desires are a good thing, my wants and needs are a good thing, you know, as long as they're not harming other people. You really want to actually tune into, what do I want? Because that's your power, that's your creative essence, if you will, kind of your life force, so to speak.
It's a great point. I think so many of us, whether you're talking about like missions work, give your life away for Christ, or even I think a lot of women got this sense of like, just do anything you can, like just be a slave basically to your husband's needs. Like so many different aspects where they just tear people down and say, give, 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 give. And it is a weird experience to at some point, like actually be selfish, and to call that a good thing in your thought life. But yeah, it's point very well taken. I want to read a few quick comments here and then jump to the next topic here. Let's see here. Where did we leave off? Yeah, Christianity is just another brick in the wall. Thank you, Ronnie. Great to see you. Good discussion. Fun to see you both again. Thank you so much. How did you overcome the system? I'm not sure particularly which system, but we're kind of talking through it all tonight. Personally, I like to believe God to be our best friend in every single way, and I'm just sick of the idea that Jesus is our best friend and God is our judge. Jesus saves us from. Yeah, I mean, there are people that deconstruct and still try to sort of keep Jesus in some way, and I think you may be on that path, from what I understand of your journey. If it's a step too far to go to atheism or agnosticism, at least to get away from the judgment and the hell stuff is a good starting point. And it's your journey. This is not about everyone looking the same. If your journey keeps you with one foot in Christianity, but a better version, in my opinion, it's your journey, and we certainly respect where you're going to land and your timing. This is why I hope Black Christians wake up. It's a slaver's religion. Yeah, it's amazing to me that that so many people are willing to just keep on basically being oppressed by this religion. It's crazy. Love Dr. Pepper. This is a space for those who are in reality without the mythology of God and Jesus. Yeah, exactly. We're primarily here to focus on people who are saying Christianity is mythology, but I definitely understand that it's not going to be where everybody lands at the moment. But I do want to make sure we also don't. We're not here to trigger all the people that are kind of saying we're done with Christianity, we're done with religion. We don't want to trigger all those people. This is a safe place for people who have escaped and have said it's irrelevant. So I went through a stage where I didn't want to die because I didn't want to go to hell, and I had lots I wanted to live for, but I was somewhat suicidal. Yeah, Christianity does a number on you. Left Jesus, but still like the island. Idea of a teddy bear God. Yeah, I mean, for some people, if God is just like a big father in heaven that's looking out for you and writing a beautiful story with your life, that's where some people need to be. That's in my opinion, and I'm not trying to be I mean, not trying to be patronizing. I see God more as a crutch for a lot of us, but for a lot of people, they would probably say that's not true for how they see it. And I do respect that some people land differently. Wanted to ask you, Andrew, if I could, about a topic of spiritual attachment theory, which I know you've talked about a number of times. How often is what we would have called faith in God really just like one of these attachment patterns, but in disguise? And what are some of the opportunities for change that can occur when we start to say we're going to stop trying to repair our childhood wounds through this cosmic divine parent, aka Yahweh? Like, how does attachment theory work with Christians and the healing process?
Oh, great question. I don't even remember what I wrote on that article, to be honest, so I'll just wing it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of our trauma and wounding is with attachment issues to early caregivers, and this kind of pattern of God being your primary connection in Christianity is this abusive relationship, which it was with our attachment patterns, we have what are known as attachment styles that develop. You can have a secure attachment, which is ideal when there's consistent nurturing and care with your early caregivers, and you cry and your needs are met. Or you can develop an anxious or insecure attachment when it's inconsistent, or when it's both positive and negative. When there's an experience of, say, your attachment figure, your parents are there for you, but they're also somehow harmful or even abusive, then you can get what's known as a disorganized attachment style, where you both fear and trust relationships, where you're both terrified of intimacy and want it at the same time. So it can be triggering. And this is what happens with the Christian God, because is both like loves you and is romantic and idealized and feels really awesome sometimes, and then is completely terrifying out of your mind, going to burn you with fire and psychopathically torture you forever, and is all kinds of invasive and punitive and all these things. So that can really damage our sense of self and our kind of, I guess, what you could call trust in our ability to navigate life itself and how we relate to life, and just being very very anxious about the way that we live our lives and relate to other people. So that attachment is kind of a metaphor for just how we relate to the world and life, whether that's in a humanistic way or a kind of a spiritual way. But so healing that involves, I think, experiences of connection, of trust, with whether humanism, with other people, with community, with connecting with the goodness in yourself and in humanity, or through some of these kind of non-ordinary states of consciousness, really connecting with nature, with your intuition, with your felt sense of your connection to the rest of the world, and kind of our place in the universe. And it's but the Christian ways, it's reality is not that way. It's not this punishing thing. There's a lot of unwanted experiences that we have, but it's not this persecutory figure.
Yeah. I meant to ask before we started, are you good to keep going past an hour and a half? We're almost at an hour and a half. Okay.
Yeah.
Want to make sure if you had any hard cutoffs, but a few quick comments here, just I think 3 or 4 that came in here, and then I'm going to jump to the next topic. And Clyde says, followers can make Jesus, God, love, or any other concepts into whatever they want them to mean. Yeah, but both, number one, people do make them whatever they mean. And Christians, that's why there's so many denominations. They make them into whatever they think they should be. A mean God that wants to beat you over the head, and a loving God that doesn't really care. So many denominations, and honestly, in some ways, I think it's nice to be at a spot where, from my perspective as a deconverted person, I don't really care what people do anymore with it. It's so nice to think it's irrelevant. For example, I'm interviewing tomorrow a wonderful person that's on Instagram, and she's a heavily deconstructed Christian. She's not at the point where she would say, I'm not a Christian anymore. She is a Christian, at least she would say so, but she's heavily deconstructed, and she doesn't tell her kids you're sinners or going to hell. And so we're going to talk through what it means from a, somewhat of a Christian perspective to deconstruct heavily, but not go all the way out. And, everyone, there's different train stops. And if one of the train stops that I get off is a stop too far for you, do what's right for you. Just, as long as we're not hurting each other, I think that's the most important thing. Thank you, Andrew, for explaining such complex concepts through psychology. So helpful. Absolutely. Absolutely amazing live stream. Thank you so much, Susanna. The idea of God being evil depressed me, but I also thought maybe if I was such a horrible, harmful sinner, that God was right to send me to hell for being just a little wrong or imperfect, then maybe the best way I could love God and others was to let God send me to hell so everyone was safe from me. I mean, gosh, that's the sick stuff that it does to us. That's why so many of us look at this and say it's toxic beyond words. When I was a young child, I'd sneak sugar cubes from the coffee station at church. I did not feel guilty about that, but I also tried to make sure not to be found out. That's awesome. I don't know if I did sugar cubes, but I probably did that with donuts. Donuts are my downfall. Thank you, Tim and Andrew, for all the care shown by the work you both do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And let's see here. One second. I think that's all caught up. I did want to ask you, I'm going to divert a little bit from Christianity for a second, because I want to come back to it, because that's the main thing about my channel. But you have also done quite a bit of work where you're critical of not just evangelical dogma, but also things like certain new age groups, certain self-help groups and systems, the law of attraction. Can you talk for just a minute about some of the vulnerabilities that those belief systems, which are very different from Christianity in some ways, but they still are common enough that they're certainly systems of control that exploit people? Like, what do they have in common with each other and with Christianity? And why do people that are wounded tend to be so susceptible and so easily sort of drift from one absolutism and one black and white system into another? And it's like we keep falling for these traps. And I mean, I admit, I think even as an atheist, we can really, if you really get plugged into the atheist community, there are people that have gone from fundamentalist Christianity to fundamentalist atheism. And I think we all, if we're honest, see it in ourselves. We all tend to do it. We want the black and white, and we want other people, you're not like me, so you're wrong. I do it, you do it, we all do it. And then we end up saying, well, maybe the law of attraction is the right next step. And then now they're wrong. And the next group, we just keep falling for the same garbage. It's just a different flavor of the month. How do you help people to see that?
Yeah. So maybe I can take this as an opportunity to shamelessly plug 2 talks I'm giving. So I'm going to be speaking at the International Cultic Studies Association conference in San Diego, July 1 to 4, on 2 lectures. One is Religious Trauma and Coercion in Evangelical Christianity, a Kingship Theory of Narcissistic Control. So I'll be really breaking down the manipulations and history and doing a lot of deep deconstruction of Christianity in that. And then the other one's on law of attraction and manifestation-based groups. So there's this kind of new age doctrine known as law of attraction or manifestation, same thing, that I really discovered living in California and being involved in a lot of meditation and consciousness exploration practices, plant medicines, which again, I don't think have anything to do with, they don't have to have anything to do with your ideology. Like, you can embrace any ideology and engage in these practices, and people do. But there's a lot of ideas circulating, and this kind of a core New Age doctrine, or has become a core, but it's actually like a 19th century phenomenon. This idea that your thoughts and beliefs create reality, and that so the idea is that your thoughts and beliefs create reality, and if you focus on something and believe in it and feel good feelings about it and visualize it, then you're going to attract that energetically. You're going to manifest that. You're going to create that in conjunction with the universe. And so this is essentially there's an analog of this in Christianity known as the prosperity gospel. It's the same kind of thing. or name it and claim it theology, this idea that God wants you to prosper, and that if you have enough faith, you'll get the healing, you'll get the miracle, you'll get the wealth, or whatever. And if not, you're the problem. So this teaches a kind of hyper responsibility and a very black and white view of things, that people who are suffering is because they don't have enough faith, or they don't manifest well enough, they don't believe enough, and it's your own negative thinking that's getting in the way. It's essentially the same ideology in different forms. And it's appealing to people because it gives them, a way of changing their reality. And so, I mean, they're like, visualization can be very helpful and powerful. And the one thing that this does that's good is it helps people to get in touch with their desires and believe in themselves. So often people will say, this changed my life. And like, I'm not going to negate that it can, in that it's really powerful to use your imagination and to kind of let your mind go free and say, if I could have what I wanted, what would it be? And, what if I could actually believe myself getting the thing that I wanted? So that's, I'm all for that. I'm all for thinking positively, and doing those kinds of things. So that in itself can be a really positive thing. But I think the distortion is where we think that we're like the only variable in the universe, which is just ridiculous, Actually, Eastern traditions teach this idea of, the word karma, which is actually just cause and effect. It's this idea of cause and effect, that every cause has an effect. There's a chain of cause and effect. And basically, everything that happens in the universe is the sum total of everything interacting with everything. That's essentially what I would boil the idea of karma to. So basically, everything is connected and everything is influencing everything. So like, you're just one variable in this. There's a whole universe of things happening. And so to say that like everything that happens to you that's negative is your fault, ends up getting people caught in these OCD loops, blaming themselves, this hyper responsibility, the kind of a spiritual materialism, egocentrism. It's very kind of like me against the world. So it's interesting. It actually doesn't line up with a lot of these Eastern traditions that these New Age groups would kind of claim to associate with. But anyway, that's a different topic. So I think it's just taught a lot, and it's just unquestioned, and so people get into it because it's popular. And like you said, like, black and white simplistic views are appealing because they're simple.
Yeah, and the fact that so many of us, if you leave one system, you lose your community, you become a little bit overly desperate for a new community.
So it's important to have that critical thinking. I'm a huge fan of critical thinking. And to ask yourself, does it feel like I'm giving up myself? Does it feel like I'm like blaming myself, or denying myself by being a part of this group, or am I uncomfortable with the things that are going on? But at the same time, healthy community is a really good thing. So I want to encourage that too.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to dive into a little bit deeper into sexuality for a minute. We've touched on it a tad, but I'm going to read a little bit from your blog, just a teeny bit, and then I'll ask my question. On one of your articles, you say millions of Christians have an abusive kind of relationship with Jesus, a spiritual romance of sorts. I do not consider all relationships to Jesus inherently abusive. I speak to harmful interpretations of Jesus. I used to be in an abusive relationship with this man, so I consider it my moral responsibility to warn my Christian friends of his behavior. The first step to breaking free of abuse is to recognize that it is happening. Jesus claims absolute ownership of your body and soul. If you even think sexual thoughts about someone else, Jesus says you're cheating on him and threatens to torture you in hell forever. Jesus also commands you to worship him and constantly degrade yourself by confessing all your sexual fantasies to him, as if you deserve to be punished just for having them. But everyone has fantasies about other people. This is just part of being human. Jesus' extreme jealousy and narcissistic demand to be worshipped only demonstrates his low self-esteem and insecurity about his masculinity. Don't accept any such abusive treatment from a man. You go on to explain a lot more and unpack all that, but you sort of wrapped it up by saying, I encourage you to speak up if you have experienced sexual abuse at the hands of the abusive Jesus. Sort of my question is, in light of that and all that you could unpack there, sexual development is, in a sense, very neurologically wired with us in terms of the terror that you talk about, the judgment, the hell, the displeasure. God's going to get you. I mean, what are we talking about really? Like, what is the long-term cost of people that grow up in this? And certainly kids don't connect the dots at that age, but when we get to teenage years and you get to adulthood, and that's all the shame that's already been there begins to move towards the topic of sexuality. How does this really affect people in the sense of, adult intimacy and embodiment and pleasure and eroticism? Like, how does this damage play out in people's lives?
It's so massive. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues that I work with people, and that I've done my own work on, and in some ways still continue to work on, because sexuality is just core to being human. You could even at a more kind of subtle level tie sexuality to your creativity, to your basic aliveness. It's the kind of reproduction and will to live is tied into our sexuality at a more kind of basic level. So when that gets suppressed, our creativity and our self-expression gets suppressed also. So it is a great way and well-known way of controlling people, by controlling their sexual expression. But also in Christianity, we're dealing with ancient cultures in the Bible, in the biblical text, in ancient ideas, right? And primitive societies where rape was really common, and cultures were being conquered by war people, and so they had like very black and white views of sexuality, were in some ways politically protective in a certain way. It's just kind of simple, like like you stay away from women who are menstruating, and that's bad. Like they have, you can kind of see, if you look at it that way, like it's a very kind of primitive morality, when that was in some ways protective, and just there was a lot more weight attached to sex than to, in a lot of ways, like pregnancy, no birth control largely, and these kind of severe penalties in these primitive societies. So you can look at it on that level. And it just ends up being very black and white with it, with the prohibitions. But additionally, it's just harmful and abusive and toxic and controlling. The level of sexual repression that came to take place and characterize Christianity, evangelical and Pentecostal in particular, is near total. I mean, you're not allowed to have sexual thoughts or fantasies. And those, I mean, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, if you lust after a woman and you've committed adultery with her in your heart, and it's better to have a piece of your body removed than the whole thing thrown into hell. So for me, as like a teenager going through puberty, I was like absolutely terrified of that Bible verse and that teaching. I was like, oh my God, I'm having sexual thoughts constantly. And, now I might go to hell. And Jesus is saying, just cut it off. Just get rid of what? I mean, it was awful. It was torture. It was terrible. And so I learned to associate sexual desire with hellfire fear, literally, and just doing my healing, encountering that level of fear in my wiring in my body, and being dissociating during sexual experiences when I first started having them, in adulthood and in later adulthood. And so just this unnatural teaching, again, not having sex till marriage, you can kind of see, well, that can be, I mean, when was marriage back in biblical times for a lot of people? Like when you're like, I don't know, like, 15 years old, and you live till like 40 years old. I mean, now in the modern world, like these norms, you can kind of make sense of it back then a little bit. Again, if you look at it at that level, but now it's like we're getting, you're going to school until like 20s or 30s even, and you have this whole sexual life, and it's just unhealthy in our modern societies to have that level of repression when we have things like birth control, so a lot of it's just outdated. But a lot of it is also controlling and abusive and manipulative and repressive, and then you have the patriarchal views and the views on homosexuality and trans and everything that's just awful. And there's so many layers we could go into this, but it's a lot of work for a lot of people that they find that coming into their sexuality for the first time, like they feel that they didn't learn how to relate with their sexuality and have to catch up and learn how to date and learn how to just be comfortable in their sexuality, and can have a lot of shame that shuts down even just sexual desire or creates sexual dysfunction. So that's a whole process of working with that trauma and that shame.
Good stuff. Good stuff. A few quick comments here. Andrew, thank you for bringing this up. Can be damaging and turn into a toxic cycle that teaches victims everything is their own fault. Yeah. And the most dangerous lies are built on a grain of truth. Yeah, for sure. I did want to ask a final question, and then anything else that comes in the comments, and certainly anything else that's on your heart to share. But one of the things that I think it can be a little bit triggering for those of us who've deconstructed and deconverted to go into this is we don't really think of much as sacred anymore. We don't like those words. They feel like, oh, we're done. Every last time we were encouraged to think about things sacred, it was all mythology and we were duped. But there is something about life that sort of makes us feel like we need to try to figure out, what is going to be the fresh version of transcendence for us. And I feel like in some ways we're trying to rescue some version of sacredness from the domination of Christianity. And after all this damage that's done in religion's name, is there something that's sort of still worth preserving from in the sense of the context of our spiritual life, where we can still pursue some kind of transcendence and some kind of experience that is spiritual and yet not connected to the mystery of life and the inner depth that we want, without slipping back into superstition and without surrendering our critical thoughts? But how do you see that process, or is that even the right question to ask?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so this is something that I've explored deeply, and I mean, a lot of people might maybe disagree with some of my findings or not want to go there, which is fine. I don't want anyone to agree with me. I want you to have your own point of view, which is something I also like work with people who work with me. Like, hey, this is not my idea. Don't take my answers. Come to your own conclusions here. But what I found was I'd never had like a genuine, quote unquote, mystical or experience in Christianity. That was also one of the things that caused me to leave, was like everything that they were telling me was the voice of God. I was always like, is this just me? And I think it turns out it was. Is this my mind? Is this just the emotional music and preaching and they're saying this is God, but it's just kind of induced, kind of hypnotic. So I actually didn't have any kind of like what you could call a transcendent experience. I like to use the technical term a non-ordinary state of consciousness, until I left the religion. And for me, that gateway was psychedelics, and then also exploring through other practices like breath work, using the breath to alter the oxygen content in the bloodstream and just the brain that can kind of induce some of these experiences, and then meditation and deeper work. And so there are a lot of different states of consciousness that can be accessed through the brain. Egoless states, transegoic states of awareness, where you feel like your sense of self expands, or as in these kind of what people will describe as cosmic experiences. And but however you describe them, they're potent experiences that you can read about. There's a lot of research about, a lot of descriptions. And I think kind of religion kind of claimed these experiences. And I think there's something that we just have to acknowledge are part of the human experience, however you want to view those ideologically. But you'll find people who having those experiences kind of grasping for words like sacred or divine or mystical or transcendent, I think, to kind of just capture the feel that they feel that there's a sense of connection or that's beyond what is ordinary. I'll just put it that way. And these can be valuable and healing and reparative experiences for a lot of people. So I think they are valuable and can be very healing and transformational. And but like, again, like religion claimed them and said, this proves that there's God, this proves our ideology. Well, I'm like, well, no, it doesn't prove anything. It's an experience that's in the human experience, and what you want to do with that is what you want to do with it.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, I know that I've asked you a lot of questions. I don't see any new questions coming in on the comments here, but I just want to mention, just read a few. Not as much questions for you, but it's good to remember how it was back then, all those thoughts. It's a similar experience for all of us. Yeah. And if anyone has, we'll probably wrap up here in a minute, but I'm going to give the floor to Andrew to wrap up with any sort of final thoughts that were on his heart. But if anyone has any final questions, StreamYard usually takes a minute or two for you to type it from when you type it into when it comes through. So type it in now for any final questions for Andrew, and I'll be on the lookout for that. And we'll read those in just a minute if anything comes in. But Andrew, just in terms of, you're dealing with so many topics that are so relevant, I mean, to me, to my life, personally, as well as the channel's topics. You're dealing with, again, the psychology, the religious trauma, the spiritual abuse, the sexuality, just all these things and more. And, I think one of the questions I meant to ask, and I'll pop it in here. I wasn't sure I should ask it, but so many of us, I think, in this day and age with politics, are feeling like we are frustrated, like very frustrated at what's going on in our world. And, when you look at the fact that so many of these things that we're concerned about and that we are saying we're trying to heal from, we're yet in some ways seeing some of the worst parts of them in terms of like the political extremism coming up and trying to, like, now that we've escaped this and we're feeling like we're on such a different playing field and such a different path, yet we're seeing people try to shove it down our throats politically. And how do you talk to people when you think about this stuff, not in terms of religious extremism, but more like the political extremism? It is a very different animal, but yet people are still doing the same thing where they're trying to dominate you, they're trying to control you, they're trying to make you think black and white thinking. I mean, I think MAGA is probably on that spectrum for sure. Mm-hmm. Like, do you find that some of the topics that you deal with are also helping people to think through how the same exact thing is happening in the arena of politics and of our national culture as well?
100%. Yeah. So I wrote an article on my blog called God the Fascist.
Okay.
That if anyone's interested in this topic, I go through the Bible and examine the ways in which God is a fascist. And so how this fascistic ideology is embedded in a lot of the Bible. I mean, really, the Bible is a kingship, is based on this kingship idea that God is a king, God is a monarch, and the people of God, the chosen people of God, are this kingdom. They're founded with a genocide. Literally, the thing starts with a genocide and ends with a genocide, with hell forever in these eternal concentration camps, if you will. And this kingdom that they're commanded to basically dominate the world with the Great Commission and convert everybody and oppress, and it's this whole fascistic vision of domination and suppression, and so if you want to check that out, there's also an article, God Has a Narcissistic Personality Disorder and His Evangelical Christianity's God the Devil, that I wrote on the blog. But with that, it's this whole ideological structure is kingship based, is a narcissistic kind of ideology, and is a fascistic kind of ideology, and it is a power structure, and so it's easy to exploit for political ends, because it's kind of the same kind of a thing. This is why ideologues and fascists can like these kinds of religions and then exploit them, because they have the same kind of power structure and fascistic appeal, if you will. And so often people find that deconstructing one can lead to deconstructing the other. And it's also why the two are bedfellows, if you will. you know
Yeah, they really are. It's amazing to me um, how much we're seeing in terms of people who were stuck in Christianity are now stuck in some of these horrific aspects of where our government's gone, and defending it as if, I mean, it's helpful for us to for us to see, okay, that's what you really believed all this time. But
Yeah.
it's still shocking to think, okay, though you were connecting those things as if they kind of blend together really smoothly. And to those of us who were either already out, or maybe some Christians that are in shock at it, they're like, these things don't go together. But you
Yeah.
realize, like, to some of them,
Well,
they do go together.
well, they shouldn't go together, right?
Right.
I mean, but the thing is that the Bible is, coming out of Christianity, you can understand the Bible for what it actually is. It's a polyvocal set of ancient texts written by different authors over a long period of time who had all kinds of contradictory ideas, right? So some of them are good ideas, some of them are awful ideas. And so really in the Bible there's all kinds of deep contradictions about literally every topic, ranging from God to salvation to human nature to everything. The Bible is constantly contradicting itself. And so like you do have these extremes. You have on the one hand like, you know, Christians being really loving because there is that aspect taught in the Bible. There's good things taught, but then you have literally fascism and genocide taught too. So it's like, well, I mean, there's a biblical precedent for, a lot of the awful things, and it can be hard for people to see that there is a contradiction because they're literally taught to embrace all these contradictions because they have to take the whole thing
Yeah.
literally.
Explain it away. It's crazy. It's very frustrating. I will say I hate it all. Obviously, I think it's horrible what's happening to our culture. But the only thing I sometimes say, if we're gonna look at anything and say maybe there's something that we can claim as a, you know long term positive, and it's hard to even think of it that way. But in some ways, MAGA is doing our job for us. They are helping people to see through Christianity, and I don't like how they're doing it. Of
Yeah.
course, I hate it. I wish we could just put an end to it, and and
Yeah.
and so forth. But like
Y
they're
y
like, I'm trying to show people this is a toxic worldview, and it's like, if you want proof, and the proof's right there. Look at your Lord and Savior Donald Trump. Like, I'm sorry, but this is proof. This is where it leads.
and, a lot of people are deconstructing. A lot of people I work with will come to me for that reason. They say, "With the political stuff, this is what caused me to see it."
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very tragic. But
Mhm.
well, I appreciate so much you being here. I don't see any other questions or comments that came in here. It looks like there's one or two, I should say, one or two comments, but no questions. Let's see here. It's good to remember how it was back then. All those thoughts. It's a similar experience for all of us. And I always just thought of God as a metaphor and framework people used to structure their thoughts. Yeah, and some people probably do, almost more of a deistic or a archetype kind of thing. But in terms of just bringing us to a wrap up, could you just share anything else that's on your heart? And also, could you let people know if they wanted to get a hold of you? Because I think you're awesome. I think you'd be the kind of person that if I was ready for a therapist, I'd want to ask, if you've got bandwidth in your schedule for me. But in
Appreciate
terms of
that.
like people that, would be thinking that, how can people get a hold of you? And if they're not necessarily at that level, they just want to connect with you, what's the best way to just pick up on some of your great insights?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So check out my blog, lifeafterdogma.org. And yeah, I'm an associate marriage and family therapist. Let me get the legalese, supervised by Dr. and employed by Dr. Chris Sikori in California. And what is my AMFT number? I can't even remember my number. We'll get in the comments. So I work with people in California. I also work as a religious trauma coach for people who are out of state. So supporting people in deconstructing Christian fundamentalism and healing from the trauma, healing from the abuse, targeting religious trauma. So I offer a free consultation. You can check on my blog. You can book a session with me for that if you're interested in that, and I'd be happy to see how I could support you if it feels like a fit. And I will also, I'm also finally working on a home study course, a video course, supporting people healing from evangelical Christianity, and that religious trauma, and also working on a book that I'll be coming out with at some point. But the home study course will be sooner. Yeah, so feel free to follow me on social media, on my blog, sign up for my blog, and contact me there. And just also to just really want to congratulate anyone who's on this process and on this journey. Often we can feel like it's a huge loss or a lot of shame but the people who come out of this I find tend to be the ones who are the most sincere, the ones who really tried hard to make it work, and the religion failed you and you chose yourself, and so the gold that comes out of this is that you get yourself, and choosing your authenticity and saying yes to yourself, and having a level of freedom, and a level of kind of self-reclamation that is deeper in a certain way, having gone through this experience.
Amazing stuff. You're speaking my language, man. You really are. By the way, I put all the information in the comments there. If you do need to officially read that off for legal purposes.
Great. Well, as long as it's somewhere on here. You said comments?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There we go. AMFT 146397, associate marriage and family therapist. There, I already said the rest. Great.
Perfect. Well, I want to say thank you, number one, for the earlier interview you did many years ago, too long ago. I'll make sure we don't repeat that. That was on me. I'll make sure I reach out to you sooner for the next one. But I just appreciate so much your heart in this, because you come at this with such insights. And I struggle as a layperson to find the words. And I think sometimes I find something that's like a little gold nugget, but then someone like you comes on and you're just like, with your experience and your knowledge, you just kind of help me find so many more words so much more quickly, and they're so much more accurate. I appreciate that so much, just personally, and for the channel, of course, too. But this is the kind of stuff that to me is like going from if I can borrow from the Christianese, going from the milk to the meat. Like, I really want to understand there's something going on in our headspace. There's a reason that some of us struggle with depression and anxiety, and it's going to be different for everybody, and there's a lot of reasons that sometimes overlap, but some of it I'm sure for a lot of us who are deconstructing, some of it is based on the fact that we still have unhealed wounds from our childhood. And one of my biggest goals in my mind is to almost have not a truly transcendent experience, but to have somewhat of a creative, poetic experience, if you will, where I go back to my 5-year-old self and say, hey man, we need to have a talk. I've got some things I need to warn you about. And I know that can't happen in reality. That's just a creative expression. But I try my best to think through how to get to the point where I can do that, and to think, I want that, if I can ever get to the point where I'm doing that, I want that to be so real to me that it almost, in a sense, feels psychologically and emotionally like I did get a chance to go back to my 5-year-old self and warn them and tell them stuff and say, not about Christianity being mythology, although that's part of it, but more about the idea that you are going to be systematically broken down. And when it's all over, you're going to realize what happened, but the process to build yourself back up is going to be very complicated, and you won't even necessarily even know what happened, because Christianity's had a long time to perfect this process. And it's very stealthy. It happens under the radar, and you do it with joy in your heart and clapping and dancing, and you think it's all a good thing. And it's indoctrination, it's propaganda, it's manipulation, it's psychological abuse. And I know I've got a lot to heal from, and I'm sure some other people could definitely relate. And I love when people like you can come on and give us, and I'm sure that just like everyone else, some of the stuff you said probably went over our heads, or at least it was just too much to absorb. That's why we might go back and watch it again, or go to your blog and pick it up there. But just to say, at least we've got a few things for today to grab onto and say, I can work on that. I can think through that, and to hopefully slowly make progress towards saying to ourselves, there's some real healing to do. And if you are willing to do the hard work and figure out what's in your headspace, you will slowly take steps, just like we took steps slowly to deconstruct, to slowly ask better and better questions about Christianity, which led us to an outcome. I think we can arguably take small but increasing steps toward figuring out what happened to us, what was done to us, what were the messages that we were given as kids, and which messages are still there pulling the strings like a marionette, like a puppet, and to say, if you're willing to do the hard work and the heart work, if you're willing to do the hard work and the heart work, that eventually you will make serious progress through the issues of autonomy and self-acceptance and self-love, and get just like you can look back and say, I can't believe I used to be a Christian. It's like so long ago. If I even hear a pastor speaking now, I'm like, you know what? There was a day that I fully believed that stuff, and to me now it's like another life. And I kind of want that same experience with my psychology and my healing, to say, you were decimated, you were shredded by Christianity, you were a different person back then, but you kept trying, you kept showing up, and eventually, despite the blinders that we all have and that I certainly have, and despite the fact that it's hard to see what's really driving us, eventually you saw enough, and you had enough people like you, like Andrew, to help us see through it. It's like, okay, I see what I'm doing to myself. I am, like you said earlier, I am policing myself. I am attacking myself. I am putting myself down. I am saying, Tim, you are bad, 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 bad. It's like, I thought I already dealt with this during deconstruction. It's like, no, you dealt with whether Christianity was mythology during deconstruction. You did not deal with the bad, bad, bad messages. And that's still a whole different journey. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you giving us some things to work through and to work toward. And my hope for all of us, as I say to a lot of my friends privately, like, I hope for better days ahead for a lot of us, including in this healing process. But anyway, do you have any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up for the night?
Well, no, thank you so much for having me and for the work that you're doing. I mean, I've heard from so many people who benefited from this channel. So just so you know that.
Thank you. That means the world. Yeah. It's an honor and a privilege, honestly, to be part of it. It's amazing. And I get the privilege of meeting people like you and a lot of other amazing people. So it's quite the honor, and I feel very humbled to be part of it. So hopefully we can all help each other grow into a community where we're just like, we need each other, and we're going to get through this. But I'll just say thank you so much again to Andrew. All the links to connect with Andrew, even if you want to watch our old interview, are beneath this video. So please do check them out, like and subscribe and all that. I do also want to say one last thing, Andrew. You need to be a YouTuber. we need more of you. We need a lot more of you.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Consider it.
All right.
When the time comes, when you've got that channel going, let me know. I know you've got the one channel with like one video up, but like when it becomes a career thing for you, let me know. We'll put it on blast, and we'll make sure people get subscribed to you.
The docket. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'll wrap up then by saying thank you to everybody. Please do join me tomorrow. I have 3 interviews, almost back to back to back, starting in the morning with the amazing Seth Andrews from the Thinking Atheist channel, as well as several others. So please do keep an eye out for them. If you like and subscribe, it'll just pop up like 30 minutes before the live stream starts and remind you and say, hey, do you want to join this? So please do that if you can. And I appreciate all my amazing supporters as well, keeping me on the air. And thank you so much.
Seth for me too.
Absolutely. We'll do.
All right.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.